It was the most successful product in human history. It was indestructible. It was everywhere. In the early 2000s, Nokia didn't just own the market, they were the market. Controlling 40% of the world's mobile phone industry, they were untouchable, a Finnish giant that had conquered the world. But while Nokia was busy perfecting the indestructible brick, a storm was brewing in Cupertino, California, a storm their executives laughed at. They called this new device a toy. They said it wouldn't pass a drop test. It was the greatest corporate miscalculation in history. Within just 6 years, a king that had reigned for decades would be sold for parts. Thousands would lose their jobs, an entire nation would be shaken. This isn't just a story about a phone, it's a story of arrogance, a culture of fear, and a burning platform that no one saw until it was too late. To understand how Nokia conquered the world, you have to understand that they didn't start with technology. They started with trees and rubber. In 1865, a mining engineer named Frederick Idestam established a wood pulp mill on the banks of the Nokian River in southern Finland. The company took the name of the river, Nokia. For decades, they made one thing: paper. By the early 1900s, Nokia expanded. They made toilet paper, bicycle tires, and rubber boots. If you lived in Finland, there was a good chance Nokia was keeping your feet dry. But the Finnish spirit, something they call sisu, a kind of extraordinary determination in the face of adversity, pushed them to constantly evolve. In the 1960s, they entered electronics. First, radio telephones for the Finnish army, then televisions, then the gamble that would change everything: mobile phones. While the rest of the world saw mobile phones as luxury items for Wall Street traders and Hollywood executives, Nokia saw them differently. They believed communication was a basic human right. They were going to make phones for everyone, and they did. By 1998, Nokia had overtaken Motorola to become the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer. But they didn't stop there. The Nokia 1100, a phone specifically designed for developing markets with a built-in flashlight and dust-proof keypad, became the best-selling electrical device in human history. Over 250 million units sold. By 2000, Nokia was responsible for 4% of Finland's entire GDP. 1 in 4 Finns either worked for Nokia or a company that depended on it. They were the Apple of Europe before Apple was Apple. Inside those glass towers, innovation was happening at breakneck speed. Nokia's research labs were legendary. They had more patents than almost any tech company in the world. They were building the future. But inside those same towers, a dangerous delusion was taking root. Nokia had become so successful, so dominant, that they stopped looking at the horizon. They believed they had already won the game. Little did they know, the game was about to change forever.
January 9th, 2007. Most people at Nokia headquarters didn't think this day mattered. They were too busy celebrating another record-breaking quarter. 350 million phones sold in a single year. But in San Francisco, Steve Jobs was about to pull the rug out from under the entire mobile industry. The iPhone was everything a Nokia wasn't. It was elegant, it was intuitive, it didn't have a keyboard, it had a touchscreen that responded to your fingers like magic. But most importantly, it wasn't a phone with a computer inside, it was a computer that could make calls. Back in Finland, Nokia's leadership watched the reveal, and they laughed. Nokia executives said, "The iPhone is a niche product for rich Americans. It doesn't have a physical keyboard. People will hate typing on glass. The battery lasts 6 hours. Ours lasts a week." They looked at the iPhone's weak battery life, its lack of 3G connectivity, and its high price, and they concluded this was a toy for the wealthy. It would never threaten Nokia's dominance. But they were looking at the hardware while the world was falling in love with the software. Nokia was trapped. in a nightmare of its own making: Symbian. Symbian was Nokia's operating system, and on paper, it was a marvel. It powered hundreds of millions of phones. It was flexible, customizable, and battle-tested. But Symbian was like a house that had been renovated 100 times. Every time Nokia added a new feature, they had to work around old code written a decade earlier. It was a mess of patches, duct tape, and prayers. Former Nokia engineers later admitted, "We knew Symbian was dying, but no one had the courage to say it out loud." While Apple and Google were building sleek highways, Nokia was trying to pave a swamp. And then, in 2008, Google entered the race with Android. Unlike Apple's closed system, Android was open source. Any manufacturer could use it. Samsung, HTC, LG, they all jumped on board. Nokia was now being squeezed from both sides. The premium market belonged to Apple. The mass market was being devoured by cheap Android phones. And Nokia? Nokia was stuck in the middle, with an operating system that was falling apart. Inside Nokia, panic was setting in. Engineers were working 80-hour weeks trying to rebuild Symbian from scratch. Managers were screaming at each other in meetings. Deadlines were being missed. Promises were being broken. But the biggest problem wasn't the technology, it was the culture. Nokia had always prided itself on its Finnish values: honesty, humility, collaboration. But by 2008, something toxic had taken root: a culture of fear. Years later, a study by INSEAD Business School would reveal the truth. Middle managers at Nokia were so terrified of being fired that they lied to their bosses. They told executives that new software was almost ready, when in reality, it was months, sometimes years behind schedule. They hid problems, they buried bad news, they painted a rosy picture while the ship was sinking. It was like the old story of the emperor's new clothes. The king was being told he was wearing fine robes, while in reality, he was standing naked in the cold. And the world was starting to notice. News headlines read, "Nokia loses market share for 5th straight quarter." iPhone sales surge past Nokia in the premium segment. Is Nokia too slow to compete? By 2010, Nokia's dominance was crumbling. They were still selling more phones than anyone else, but the profits were evaporating. The iPhone and Android weren't just winning, they were rewriting the rules. The house wasn't just leaking, it was on fire.
In September 2010, Nokia made a desperate move. They fired their CEO and brought in an outsider, Stephen Elop, a Canadian executive from Microsoft. Elop was the first non-Finn to ever run Nokia, and he walked into a company in denial. For his first 3 months, Elop toured Nokia's offices around the world. He talked to engineers, designers, salespeople, and what he found shocked him. The company was further behind than anyone realized. Symbian was unfixable. Their new operating system, Memo, was years away from being ready, and worst of all, no one was telling the truth. On February 8, 2011, Elop did something extraordinary. He wrote a memo to all 60,000 Nokia employees. The memo read, "There is a pertinent story about a man who was working on an oil platform in the North Sea. He woke up one night from a loud explosion which suddenly set his entire oil platform on fire. He had seconds to react. He could stand on the platform and inevitably be consumed by the burning flames, or he could plunge 30 meters into the freezing waters of the North Sea. The man chose to jump. It was unexpected. In ordinary circumstances, the man would never consider plunging into icy waters. But these were not ordinary times. Elop was telling his employees that Nokia was the burning platform, and they had to jump. The memo leaked to the press within hours. Nokia's stock plummeted. Employees were devastated. But Elop had made his point. If they didn't change immediately, they would die. The question was, where would they jump? 3 days after the burning platform memo, ELOP made the biggest gamble in Nokia's history. Nokia and Microsoft announced a broad strategic partnership that would transform both companies. Nokia was abandoning Symbian, they were abandoning Memo, and they were betting everything on Windows Phone. On paper, it made sense. Microsoft was a tech giant with deep pockets and a beautiful new operating system. Windows Phone had a fresh, modern design. It was smooth, it was different. But there was one catastrophic problem: apps. By 2011, apps had become the lifeblood of smartphones. People didn't just want a phone, they wanted Instagram, Snapchat, Google Maps, YouTube, and almost none of those apps were available on Windows Phone. Developers said, "Why would I build for Windows Phone? It had 3% market share. It wasn't worth the time." Developers didn't want to build for a platform that had no users, and users didn't want a platform that had no apps. It was a vicious cycle. Nokia poured billions into the partnership. They released beautiful phones, the Lumia line, with stunning designs and incredible cameras. The Lumia 1020 had a 41-megapixel camera that put the iPhone to shame. Critics loved the hardware, but it didn't matter. The world had already chosen iOS or Android. There was no room for a third. By 2013, it was clear. The gamble had failed.
On September 3, 2013, the unthinkable happened. Microsoft announced it would acquire Nokia's devices and services business for $7.2 billion. Nokia sold its entire mobile phone business to Microsoft for just $7.2 billion. To put that in perspective, at their peak in 2000, Nokia's market value was over $250 billion. Now they were selling the core of their business for pocket change. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Entire divisions were shut down. In Finland, it felt like a national tragedy. At the press conference, Nokia's chairman, Risto Siilasmaa, his voice breaking, said, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That line, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost," became the epitome of Nokia's tragedy. But the truth is, they did do something wrong. They were so focused on perfecting what made them successful that they forgot to evolve. They mistook market dominance for invincibility. So what really killed Nokia? It wasn't one mistake. It was a perfect storm of strategic, cultural, and technological failures. First, they underestimated the competition. Nokia saw the iPhone as a luxury toy. They saw Android as cheap and fragmented. They didn't realize that software was eating the world. Second, they were trapped by their own success. Symbian powered 40% of the world's phones. Scrapping it meant admitting they were wrong, and psychologically, that was too painful. Third, the culture of fear. Managers were too afraid to tell the truth. Problems were hidden until it was too late. Innovation died in silence. Fourth, they moved too slowly. In the mobile industry, speed is everything. By the time Nokia realized they needed to change, Apple and Google had already built unbeatable ecosystems. And fifth, they bet on the wrong partner. Microsoft was fighting the same battle Nokia was. Two drowning companies don't save each other, they just sink together. Nokia didn't fail because they made bad phones. They failed because they stopped thinking like a startup and started thinking like a king. And in technology, kings don't last long. But here's the twist. Nokia didn't die. After selling their phone business, Nokia pivoted. They focused on what they'd always been good at: infrastructure. Today, Nokia is one of the world's leading providers of 5G network equipment. They built the invisible backbone that powers your smartphone, whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung. They also retained one of the most valuable patent portfolios in the world. Every smartphone manufacturer, including Apple, pays Nokia licensing fees for using their innovations. And financially, they've stabilized. They're profitable. They're no longer the king of phones, but they found a new kingdom.
In a final twist of irony, Nokia even returned to the phone market in 2017, not making phones themselves, but licensing their brand to a Finnish startup called HMD Global, which makes Android phones under the Nokia name. They even brought back the 3310, because sometimes nostalgia is the most valuable product of all. Nokia's fall is a warning to every giant of today. No company is too big to fail. No brand is too loved to be forgotten. History is littered with kings who thought they were untouchable. Blockbuster laughed at Netflix. Kodak invented the digital camera and then buried it. BlackBerry thought physical keyboards were sacred. The leaders of today's tech giants know this. That's why Apple kills its own products before competitors can. That's why Google runs dozens of experimental projects. That's why Amazon is obsessed with day one mentality. Because in the world of technology, survival doesn't belong to the strongest, it belongs to the most adaptable. Nokia survived for over 150 years by constantly reinventing themselves, from paper to rubber to phones to networks. They forgot that lesson once, and it nearly destroyed them. The phone in your hand right now, whether it's an iPhone, a Samsung, or even a Nokia, exists because of the war that was fought in the late 2000s, a war where the old king fell and new empires rose from the ashes. Nokia's story is one of the most important business lessons of the 21st century. It teaches us that success is fragile, that culture matters more than strategy, and that the moment you stop questioning yourself is the moment you start losing. Here on Arthur's Ledger, we're building a library of these stories, the rises, the falls, the lessons that shape our economy. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching Arthur's Ledger. Remember, no empire is too big to fall, and no lesson is too old to learn.